The clock is ticking towards what is now described as a soft August 1st deadline for a trade deal between Canada and the United States. And now President Donald Trump says a final deal may not happen at all.
We haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada. I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariff. Not really a negotiation.
We are looking for the best deal for Canada. We're only going to accept the best deal for Canada.
Detroit had been through a lot. Economic crashes, mass layoffs, bankruptcies, and even the collapse of entire industries. The Motor City had always bent, but never broken. It was a place that defined American grit. But nothing hit quite like this. It started quietly. No headlines, no warnings, just an eerie silence. Trains that once hauled tons of Canadian steel into Detroit's factories began arriving empty. Warehouse lights stayed off. Forklifts gathered dust. By early July 2025, almost every shipment of steel and aluminum from Canada to the United States had vanished, just disappeared. Automakers scrambled, supply chains fractured, prices tripled overnight, and it wasn't just the auto industry. Across Michigan, construction sites fell silent, projects stalled. Workers were sent home. The city that once built the future of America found itself frozen in place. Meanwhile, just across the river in Hamilton, Ontario, it was like stepping into another universe. Steel mills that had long gone cold fired up again with a fury. The hum of machines returned. Parking lots filled, shifts expanded. Small towns like Windsor and Sault Ste. Marie, places many had written off, roared back to life. For years, they were relics of a bygone industrial era. Now, they were back in business. The question on everyone's lips wasn't how, it was why. Why did Canada pull the plug? The answer wasn't a press release or a speech. It was a strategy, quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. The spark came in June 2025 when former U.S. President Donald Trump invoked Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. A Cold War-era provision designed to protect national security, it was now being used to impose a crushing 50% tariff on all Canadian steel and aluminum entering the U.S. Despite being America's closest ally and its largest supplier of both materials, Canada was offered no exemption, no discussion, just tariffs. But Canada didn't retaliate with loud threats or mirror penalties. Instead, it moved with cold precision. Ottawa rewrote the rules. Procurement standards were quietly tightened. Environmental regulations sharpened. National security protocols were updated. Officially, no American companies were banned, but in reality, most could no longer meet the new criteria. Contracts dried up. Shipments stopped. U.S. Steel producers found themselves frozen out. Canada didn't raise a wall. It recalibrated the playing field. But here's the kicker, this wasn't a knee-jerk response. It had been in the works long before Trump's tariff bombshell. Back in early 2025, Ottawa had already launched a $1 billion steel modernization fund. The goal? Not just survival, but transformation. Outdated mills were retrofitted with low-emission technology. Domestic capacity expanded. The entire industry was aligned with national energy and climate goals. Public projects from subway lines to naval ships were required to use domestically sourced low-carbon steel. If your product didn't meet the new standards, your bid wasn't even considered. It was more than policy. It was vision. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the shockwaves were brutal. Automakers, already struggling with inflation and semiconductor shortages, now faced skyrocketing raw material costs. Ford reported a staggering $2.5 billion rise in production costs in just 6 months. Input prices surged between 6% and 9%. Assembly lines in Detroit, Flint, and Dearborn ground to a crawl. Entire vehicle launches were delayed or canceled. Thousands of jobs were at stake. And yet, Washington stood paralyzed. Canada, on the other hand, kept moving forward. One of the most transformative steps came with a shift to electric arc furnaces facilities that melt recycled steel using electricity instead of coal. These high-tech systems, paired with hydrogen-based direct reduced iron, DRI, emit a fraction of the carbon of traditional blast furnaces. And Canada had the power literally to pull it off. Ontario and Quebec are rich in hydroelectric energy. Their grids were rapidly upgraded to deliver clean, renewable electricity directly to steel plants. While American mills continued to rely on fossil fuels, Canada was building the greenest steel production network in the world. And the timing couldn't have been better. Europe was preparing its carbon border adjustment mechanism, a policy that taxes imports based on their carbon emissions. U.S. steel would be hit hard, but Canadian steel? It would cruise through, penalty-free. That's not just policy, that's strategy. But Canada didn't stop at production. It tackled recycling head-on. A 35% tax rebate was introduced for manufacturers, prioritizing scrap steel. Regional recycling hubs were modernized. Municipal programs restructured. What was once waste became gold. Scrap steel was no longer an afterthought. It became a core asset in a circular, sustainable economy. The payoff was huge. Canadian producers gained access to cheap, clean inputs while shielding themselves from global commodity shocks. Meanwhile, American officials pointed fingers. Congress held hearings. Press conferences were filled with blame. But no one offered a plan that even resembled what Canada had built. It wasn't about who shouted louder, it was about who prepared better. The most profound shift came not in policy, but in identity. Canada no longer treated steel as a bulk commodity. It became a diplomatic asset, a climate solution, a geopolitical tool. Ottawa introduced carbon passports, official certifications proving a batch of steel met strict emission standards. These passports unlocked access to European markets and allowed Canada to position its products as premium goods, not just cheap exports. And Canada made it clear. Its steel would go to partners who shared its values, not just whoever paid the most. At home, this set off a race. Producers rushed to meet carbon standards, not to boast, but to survive. Because the biggest contracts, the government-funded infrastructure projects, only went to those who played by the new rules. By the end of 2025, the result was undeniable. Canada had redefined its industrial economy, quietly, strategically, permanently. And the US? It was still reeling. Factories were behind. Costs were high. Confidence was low. The administration was stuck between protecting jobs and addressing climate concerns. And as America spun its wheels, Canada accelerated past. It's tempting to call this a trade war, but that's not what it was. It was an industrial revolution. A battle not of bombs or bans, but of blueprints. A contrast between tariffs and transformation. One country built walls, the other built bridges. Ottawa didn't need to make noise, it just needed to stay the course. It aligned steel with sustainability, industry with diplomacy, and economics with ethics. So now the world watches. As Europe closes its borders to dirty steel, Canada is already there, offering clean, hydro-powered, carbon-certified supply. As the US scrambles for answers, Canada builds relationships. And while headlines fade, contracts are signed, partnerships are sealed, and the map of global trade is being redrawn. This isn't just Canada's story. It's a preview of what's coming for every country, every industry. The age of carbon-neutral manufacturing is here. And Canada didn't just adapt to it, it helped define it. So, the next time someone tells you the future is built on tariffs and threats, tell them about the quiet shift, the smart shift, the steel shift, the one that froze Detroit and rewired Canada. Thanks for watching. If this video opened your eyes, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks the old rules apply. Because the future isn't waiting, and neither should we.